Yeah, I commenced my career here with Geelong West as a colt in under 15s. Then I went on to play under 19s under coach John Woods. Played a couple of games in the reserves, and then I was elevated to the seniors, and I was here till 1978, playing a couple of games in 75, the premiership year, 76, 77, and in 78 I had probably my best year, and that was when I won the best and fairest of the club. I had my first hit out amongst the so-called men, being a kid at the time. I was only 16, very close to 17 years of age. I remember Billy gave me a bit of a run in a practice match, and the practice match was against Caulfield, and I can still remember now that Billy just said to me, you know, the biggest thing is go out and just keep playing the way you're playing. He said, but be very careful, he said, because there's men out there, and he said, you know, if you look like getting a few kicks, I'll soon chop you down in size. Well, I recall I went on just before three-quarter time, and in them days there was no interchange, so you knew you were on for the rest of the game unless you got injured. And look, it was a really big wake-up call. You know, the guys were big, you're trying to get in amongst them, and you're sort of getting pushed out of the way. But you always knew that, you know, you just had to keep chipping away and just do your own thing, and just not lose focus. And the main thing is, back in them days, the amount of encouragement that I got from players was incredible. You know, the players just wanted me to do well, and after a couple of goes at practice matches and playing a few senior games in 75, you sort of felt that you could sort of fit in. And you knew very well that if you were going to fit in or not fit in, and I felt that although I wasn't really big framed, I had to diversify, and the way I diversified was by just keep running and using my ability and using my agility, and that's what sort of got me through the early stages. And you copped a fair whack, you got a couple of hits, but I remember we had Kevin Varker was a trainer, and he wasn't back when coming forward. He'd just tell you to get up and stop sooking. So the initiation was pretty hard. If you went down, you either got up or you just lie down. And if you lie down, you're never going to make it. So at times I didn't feel like getting up, got a really good whack, but you know, Kevin would be right on top of you. Wouldn't be holding you, wouldn't be trying to help you up, you'd just be yelling in your ear, get up. He goes, you can't lie down. That's exactly the way it was played back in them days. In 78 was definitely a breakout year, and I thoroughly enjoyed playing, and I played on the half-back flank, which I felt was a good place to play on the ground, because in the VFA you had no wingers, and you know, for the half-forward flanker was on the opposite side of the ground. You had a good 70 metres in front of you, so I was a sort of running on sort of player, and I was given a sort of free rein by the coach, which was excellent, and I was able to sort of run up and down the ground a fair bit, and I was really encouraged by the fact that Geelong was sort of looking at me halfway through the year, and they kept sort of keep me interested in sort of moving my performance level. And as I said, in 78 it was a great year. It was more about being a team player than going out and winning best and fairest. But look, at the end of the year, I was awarded the award, and something that I really cherish at the moment, because I feel that as an individual it's a great honour, but at the same time, that night I was reasonably young. I was still an apprentice at forwards at that stage, and all the players were happy for me, and it's something that I'll never forget. Obviously I'm Italian, and Mum and Dad don't really take a liking to AFL football or VFL football. Back in them days, to go up to Italian parents and tell them that you're playing your first senior game, Mum and Dad weren't all that worried about it, but to me it was a big thing, and they were invited to the game, but both of them declined. And I remember clearly that Billy had a 12:30 players meeting, and I said to Mum, let me know when it's 12 o'clock. Well, I lived in Geelong West, been a Geelong West boy, and that was only probably a 15-minute walk to the ground. And I remember I said, Mum, let me know 12 o'clock, I've got to start walking up to the ground. Well, back in them days, you weren't driven to the game. Being young, I just walked up Preston Street, long Paco, and I got to the Telegraph Hotel, and I could really hear a lot of noise, and I'm thinking, what's going on? I turned the corner, and both sides of Church Street are full of cars. And the first thing I thought was, you know, Mum stuck it up me. She told me it was 12 o'clock, but it was later. And I ended up running from the corner of Church and Paco right to the ground, and we'll give them players passes to go down to the side of Whittle Road, and that's their gate entrance. Well, I didn't worry about that. I come through the turnstiles at the front, and I remember I walked in and I said to the guy, I said, "Oh, look, I'm late for my meeting." And the first thing he said, "Who are you?" And I said, I'm Rocco, and I'm one of the West players." And he goes, "You sure?" And I said, "Yeah." And I showed him my pass, and as I got through, and there was this guy there, and I said, "Look, mate, what time is it?" And he goes, "It's 12:10." Well, the ground was almost full, and I thought to myself, gee, and I've jumped the fence, and I've started to walk down the pavilion, and thinking, oh, this is all right, only to meet Billy at the bottom of the race, and he said, "What are you doing walking down from the front gate?" And I said, I thought it was later, and I did a shortcut. Well, I copped a barrage from Billy. Billy goes, "Team rules are team rules, and you got to enter the side gate, and that's where you got to come in." But in them days, I walked probably the length of the ground, and the amount of abuse I copped from the opposition was incredible. And that sort of sent the message that, you know, this was fair dinkum, it was VFA football, it was hard, no nonsense, and to have the ground full at 12:10 was incredible. Everybody's already had their lunch, I suppose, and they're here to watch a game of football. But no, that sort of stuck in my mind, and I thought to myself, you know, VFA football was part of Geelong, and to be a boy from West and to make it at that level was a big achievement. And I was invited down to Geelong on 2 other occasions. I was invited down there when Tom Hafey coached. Unfortunately, I wasn't good enough to make it. And then I was invited back down there when Billy went down to Geelong, and once again I wasn't good enough to make it. But there's no regrets. You know, in them days it was just hard to crack into it. You know, you had your Turners and you had your Malarkeys and your Sam Newmans and the Nan Curvis boys. And it was very hard to crack senior football, and I was very honest with the coaches and just said, look, you know, you've got a lot of ability, but you're not in the long term, you're not going to make seniors. And I suppose you don't sort of, you don't look back and sort of hold any grudges. They were very honest with me, and I knew where I stood. And but back in them days, football was, you know, it wasn't a business like it is now. I had a full-time job, and I was an apprentice at Fords, and I held a job where I was working 50 hours a week, and football was part of me 50 hours, where these days, you know, it's a full-time job. And I suppose in 20 years' time, the players are now, be looking at the players in 20 years' time, there'll be more changes. So it's just the momentum of football, and I suppose the biggest thing is just adjusting to the conditions. It's just the last thing I want to say is that my oldest daughter come home one night, she had this fella with him and introduced himself, and lo and behold, it's Jamie Gillies' son. So we've kept a little bit of the Geelong West Football Club tie, and every once in a while when I do get to see Jamie, we try and tell the kids that it was a good standard of football, but they're trying to tell us that we played around dinosaurs and all these, you know, the pace of the game was very slow. Well, believe me, it wasn't slow. It was just not a matter of physically getting through the game. It was a case of mentally getting through it also, because you know, we did have a lot of pressure on us also. People think that it was just a pastime, but it wasn't. You know, we were there, and we were fair dinkum just as much as the players are fair dinkum now. There was one occasion that I remember Billy trying to get me to play the way he wanted me to play, and I wasn't against it, but I just found it hard. I was more of a running player, and Billy wanted me to stay back home a bit more and look after players. And as much as you listen to the coaches, every once in a while, it was just a habit that you'd run off. And Billy made me pay for it by putting me on the bench the following week. And as I said, back in them days, there's no interchange. You just sat there and waited for your turn. And usually it was midway through the third quarter, if not start of the last quarter, the 2 interchange players would go on. And I remember sitting there, and it was just before 3/4 time. Billy looked across and said, "Right, get up." He goes, "You're on." And next minute I ran onto the ground, and he told me who to pick up, and I ran across and picked him up, and all of a sudden Billy Frost come running out. He was a runner, And he said, Billy said, if you don't get a kick within 5 minutes, you're off. Well, I thought, right, where's the ball? And the ball was in front of the main scoreboard, and I thought, I'm going to dart off here. So I took off, and I remember very clearly Tony Gilmore handballing the ball to me, and I was probably about 35, 40 metres out, and I've kicked the goal, and I was wrapped. I thought, job done, I've got a kick, but not only that, but I've got the supplementary also, I've got the goal. And on my way back, I was running down the middle of the ground, and lo and behold, Billy Frost runs across, and he goes, Billy said, get off. And I said, what? He goes, get off. He goes, and I ran across the boundary line, and as I got to the boundary line, he goes, what did I tell you? And I said, Billy said, I've got to get a kick within 5 minutes. He goes, your first job is to look after your man. You look after your man, you ran off. He says, that's just sit there and cool your jets. I'll never forget that. So I was on for a grand total of about 2.5 minutes. During my career here at West, I recall an incident that happened. We trained on Tuesday and Thursdays, and we trained Saturday morning. And I knew something was wrong because all the players were coming up to me on the Saturday morning and saying to me, look, you'll be right, you'll be right. And I didn't quite know what the players were on about. And that morning, at the end of training, Billy came up to me and said, look, tomorrow you're going to have one of the biggest jobs since you've been playing seniors. And he said, I'll talk to you more about it tomorrow. Well, on the Sunday, it was Port Melbourne versus Geelong West here at Church Street. And I clearly remember I was sitting there putting my boots on, and Billy sat next to me and he said, look, I'll let you know now. He goes, you're playing on Sammy Holt, do you know who he is? And I clearly said, no, I don't really know who he is. And he goes, well, you're going to get to know him pretty well. He said, he's number 10, and he goes, he looks like a samurai. And I started laughing, and he goes, look, seriously, he goes, don't be intimidated by him. He goes, when you go out there, he's not going to shake your hand, he's not going to be nice to you. He said, but don't be too scared of him. He goes, just hold your ground. And he said, the main thing is just playing tight. He said, but one thing I'll tell you is he's a bloody good player. And he goes, all I want you to do is just keep at him and keep at him. Well, it happened to be that John Friend and Ivan Russell and myself were sort of lining up across the half-back line, waiting for them players to line up. Well, lo and behold, Sammy Holt, they were kicking down the bottom and we're kicking the Church Street end. Sammy Holt lines up right in front of the coach's box, and Friendy goes, well, there he is over there, go and pick him up. So when I got within about 1.5 metres of him, he's gone to put his hand out, and I clearly remember Billy yelling out, don't shake his hand, he's a dog. And I didn't shake his hand. Well, with that, he put his hand down, but he stepped forward probably 1 metre. And with that, he just spat in my eye. And I went to wipe it, and in the movement of trying to wipe the slag out of my eye, he's giving me the best right hook, and I've hit the ground. And that was probably one of the biggest initiations of Geelong West versus Port Melbourne. And back in them days, there's only one umpire. And on that day, I clearly remember Frank Pagona was the umpire. Well, he wasn't the biggest guy in the world, and you're not going to control 32 guys out of control over an incident. And I clearly remember that there was a bit of a melee for probably 5 or 10 minutes, and even before the game bounced, and Frankie thought, well, if I throw the ball up, the player's going to settle down. So he threw the ball up and it was all over, and the fight was over and we got on with the game. But in that game, there was probably 15, 20 really good brawls, and back in them days, that's what the crowd wanted. Sure, they wanted to see a good game of football and who was going to win the game. At the end of the day, they just loved it. Nothing better than coming to West Oval, watching guys just belt the bejesus out of each other. So I clearly remember that. Some of the better players, I played against Pat Flaherty, I played on Travis Pays, Freddie Cook. One day, I remember Howard rolled his ankle and said, look, come back, full back and play on Freddie Cook. Well, I've never known a man to talk so much. He was just trying to put me off my game, and I only played on for about 10 minutes. It was just before half time, but the amount of talking Freddie did, he just tried to put me off my game. But played a lot of Travis Pays from Dandenong. There's a lot of players that back in them days to play against, and I got the privilege of playing with guys like Peter McKenna, Steve Parsons, Ricky McLean from Richmond, and those guys are just incredibly knowledgeable as far as the game went. And being a young guy, what they come up with, you wouldn't have thought of in a million years of just ways of improving your game. But yeah, it was great. Don't regret a minute of it. At the completion of 78, I was invited in Geelong, and coach at that time was Rod Olsen. Unfortunately, I didn't make it, so then I was approached by Gary Hamer, and I went down to what was known then as Barwon Football Club for 3 years, and had successful years down there, winning the best and fairest for those 3 years. And then I took up coaching with Geelong West Cricket and Football Club for 4 years, which I thoroughly enjoyed, and had a little bit of success there. Then I was invited into Grovedale, and I was assistant coach to Ian Bluey Hampshire for a couple of years, and once again I had a bit of success at that club also. And then eventually I gave it away, and didn't sort of look back on what I didn't do. I enjoyed doing what I did at the time, and that sort of kept me happy. I didn't want to keep playing when I knew that I was going to keep kids out of the game, so I just walked away from it after I finished at Grovedale.
You've given your heart to get here and your soul to get it right. You can take 'em boots and all, but it's sure gonna take a fight. When you spend all week getting to your peak, you're gonna have your say. You bet. On Sunday, it's gonna be